The Joe Rogan Experience.
Proven, right? That they have
Yeah.
invented moves.
Yeah.
AI's invented moves that have now been implemented by humans.
Right.
In a very complex game that they never thought that AI was going to be able to be because it requires so much creativity.
Right. Art, though, we're not quite there, but we will be there. And by 2029, it will match any person.
That's it? 2029. That's just a few years away.
But I'm actually considered conservative. People think that will happen like next year or the year after. But I actually said that in 1999. I said we would match any person by 2029, so 30 years. People thought that was totally crazy. And in fact, Stanford had a conference. They invited several hundred people from around the world to talk about my prediction. And people came in, and people thought that this would happen, but not by 2029. They thought it would take 100 years.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that, but I think people are amending those. Is it because human beings have a very difficult time grasping the concept of exponential growth?
That's exactly right. In fact, still economists have a linear view. And if you say, well, it's going to grow exponentially, they say, yeah, but maybe 2% a year.
Just like 2, 3, 4 years, you can now make videos, you can now create content with AI, and it can fool a human to think that art or video is created by a human. It's just crazy.
It actually doubles in 14 years. And I brought a chart I can show you that really illustrates this.
Is this chart available online so we could show people?
Yeah, it's in the book.
But is it available online, that chart, where Jamie could pull it up and someone could see it? Just so the folks watching the podcast could see it too. But I can just hold it up to the camera.
I can pull it up on the pictures they sent. What's it called? What's the title of it?
It says price performance of computation 1939 to 2023.
I have that.
You have it. Okay, great. Jamie already has it. Yeah, the climb is insane. It's like the San Juan Mountains.
What's interesting is that that's an exponential curve, and a straight line represents exponential growth. And that's an absolute straight line for 80 years. The very first point, this is the speed of computers, it was 0.000007 calculations per second per constant dollar. The last point is 35 billion calculations per second. So that's a 20 quadrillion-fold increase in those 80 years. But the speed with which it gained is actually the same throughout the entire 80 years, because if it was sometimes better and sometimes worse, this curve would bend. It would bend up, bend down. It's really very much a straight line. So the speed with which we increased it was the same regardless of the technology used. And the technology was radically different at the beginning versus the end, and yet it increased the speed exactly the same for 80 years. In fact, the first 40 years, nobody even knew this was happening. So it's not like somebody was in charge and saying, okay, next year we have to get to here, and people would try to match that. We didn't even know this was happening for 40 years. 40 years later, I noticed this. For various reasons, I predicted it would stay the same speed increase each year, which it has. In fact, we just put the last dot like 2 weeks ago, and it's exactly where it should be. So technology, and computation is certainly a prime form of technology, increases at the same speed. And this goes through war and peace. You might say, well, maybe it's greater during war. No, it's exactly the same. You can't tell when there's war or peace or anything else on here. It just matches from one type of technology to the next. And it's also true of other things, like, for example, getting energy from the sun. That's also exponential. It's also just like this. It's increased. We now are getting about 1,000 times as much energy from the sun that we did 20 years ago.
Because of the implementation of solar panels and the like.
Yeah.
Has the function of it increased exponentially as well? The function of, because what I had understood was that there was a bottleneck in the technology
No,
as
there's
far as
no
how much you could extract from the sun from those panels.
No, not at all.
No?
I mean, it's increased 99.7% since we started.
Right.
And it does the same every year. It's an exponential curve. And if you look at the curve, we'll be getting 100% of all the energy we need in 10 years.
The person who told me that was Elon. And Elon was telling me that this is the reason why you can't have a fully solar-powered electric car, because it's not capable of absorbing that much from the sun with a small panel like that. He said there's a physical limitation in the panel size.
No, I mean, it's increased 99.7% since we started.
Since what year?
That's about 35 years ago.
35 years ago. And 99% of the ability of it, as well as the expansion of use?
I mean, you might have to store it. We're also making exponential gains in the storage of electricity.
Right. Battery technology. Right.
The Teslas have gotten really better since they started. Nowadays, I think they have more range and capabilities with the same size of a car. I think that technology is, I'm not a fan of electric cars, but I think they're getting really good.
So you don't have to get it all from a solar panel that fits in a car.
Well, the concept was, like, could you make a solar paneled car, a car that has solar panels on the roof? And would that be enough to power the car? And he said no. He said it's just not really there yet.
Right, it's not there yet, but it will be there in 10 years.
You think so?
Yeah.
He seemed to doubt that. He thought that there's a certain limitation of the amount of energy you can get from the sun, period, how much it gives out, and how much those solar panels can absorb.
Well, you're not going to be able to get it all from the solar panel that fits in a car. You're going to have to store some of that energy.
Right. So you wouldn't just be able to drive indefinitely on
Right.
solar power.
Yeah.
That was what he was saying. So, but you can obviously power a house, and especially if you have a roof, like Tesla has those solar-powered roofs now.
But you can also store the energy
Right.
for a car. I mean, we're going to go to all renewable energy, wind and sun, within 10 years, including our ability to store the energy.
All renewable in 10 years? So what are they going to do with all these nuclear plants and coal-powered plants and all these things?
That's completely unnecessary. People say we need nuclear power, which we don't. I mean, you can get it all from the sun and wind within 10 years.
So in 10 years, you'll be able to power Los Angeles with sun and wind?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
I was not aware that we were anywhere near that kind of timeline.
Well, that's because people are not taking into account exponential growth.
So the exponential growth also of the grid? Because just to pull the amount of power that you would need to charge, X amount of million. If everyone has an electric vehicle by 2035, let's say then, just the amount of change you would need on the grid would be pretty substantial.
Well, we're making exponential gains on that as well.
Are we? Yeah?
Yeah.
I wasn't aware. I had this impression that there was a problem with that, and especially in Los Angeles, they've actually asked people at certain times when it's hot out to not charge your car.
They're not looking at the future.
Mm-hmm.
That's true now, but it's growing exponentially. And
In every field of technology, then essentially.
Yeah.
But now you look at these superchargers and they're still being diesel powered. So I'm a bit skeptical about this whole changing to renewable energy thing. If the electric cars needs to be charged and that power is being run through a diesel generator, then it's still fossil fuels in a nutshell.
Is the bottleneck a battery technology, and how close are they to solving some of these problems with like conflict minerals and the things that we need in order to power these batteries?
I mean, our ability to store energy is also growing exponentially. So putting all that together, we'll be able to power everything we need within 10 years.
Wow. Most people don't think that. So you're thinking that based on this idea that people have a limited
they never
idea.
imagined that computation would grow like this. And It's just continuing to do that. And so we have large language models, for example. No one expected that to happen like 5 years ago.
Right.
And we had them 2 years ago, but they didn't work very well. So it began a little less than 2 years ago that we could actually do large language models. And that was very much a surprise to everybody. So that's probably the primary example of exponential growth.
We had Sam Altman on. One of the things that he and I were talking about was that AI figured out a way to lie. That they used AI to go through a CAPTCHA system, and the AI told the system that it was vision impaired, which is not technically a lie, but it used it to bypass, are you a robot?
What we don't know now is for large language models to say they don't know something. So you ask it a question, and if the answer to that question is not in the system, it still comes up with an answer. So it'll look at everything and give you its best answer. And if the best answer is not there, it still gives you an answer, but that's considered a hallucination. And we know
A hallucination?
Yeah, that's what it's called.
Really?
So
AI hallucination. So they cannot be wrong. They have to be able to answer things.
We're actually working on being able to tell if it doesn't know something. So if you ask it something and say, I don't know that. Right now it can't do that.
Actually, that's a very big, problem with AI. It always has answers. So you don't know if these answers are always correct or if they are not they're not correct. So I think that's a very big issue with AI right now. Like, it always has an answer for everything. And I've done some research and I've input some things, and AI is telling me the author of this thing is, and it's not really that person. So I think it still has some ways to go, but it's really getting good very fast.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
So it gives you some answer, and if the answer's not there, it just like makes something up. It's the best answer, but the best answer isn't very good because it doesn't know the answer. And the way to fix hallucinations is to actually give it more capabilities to memorize things and give it more information so it knows the answer to it. If you tell an answer to a question, it will remember that and give you that correct answer. But these models are not, we don't know everything. And it has to, we have to be able to scan an answer to every single question, which we can't quite do. And it'd be actually better if it could actually answer, well, gee, I don't know that.
Right. Like, in particular, like, say, when it comes to exploration of the universe, if there's a certain amount of, vast amount of the universe we have not explored. So if it has to answer questions about that, it would just come up with an answer?
Right. It'll just come up with an answer, which will likely be wrong.
That's interesting. But that would be a real problem if someone was counting on the AI to have a solution for something too soon, right?
Right. They don't know everything. Search engines actually are pretty well vetted, and if it actually answers something, it's usually correct.
Unless it's curated.
But large language models don't have that capability. So it'd be good, actually, if they knew that they were wrong. They'd also tell us what we have to fix.
What about the idea that AI models are influenced by ideology, that AI models have been programmed with certain ideologies?
They do learn from people.
Yeah.
And people have ideologies. Some of which are not correct, and that's a large way in which it will make things up because it's learning from people.
Right.
I think that's another big problem with AI. Like this machine learning is not just machine learning, it's actually learning from people's behaviors, how they react to things. So what if the AI learns from somebody who's not really good, or somebody who's not good for the society in general? So this is a big question also with AI, like who is it learning from really?
So right now, if somebody has access to a good search engine, they will check before they actually answer something with the search engine to make sure that it's correct. Because search engines are generally much more accurate.
Generally, right. When it comes to this idea that people enter information into a computer and then the computer relies on that ideology, do you anticipate that with artificial general intelligence it'll be agnostic to ideology, that it'll be able to reach a point where instead of deciding things based on social norms or whatever the culture is accepted currently, that it would look at things more objectively and rationally?
Well, eventually. But we still call it artificial general intelligence, even if it didn't do that. And people certainly are influenced by whatever their people that they respect feel is correct, and will be as influenced by as people are. And we'll still call it artificial general intelligence. Mm-hmm. We are starting to check what large language models come up with search engines, and that's actually making them more correct.
So that's the video, guys. I think it's very interesting to really hear from somebody who is an expert in these kind of scenarios and really explain to you that AI is not, yes, it's catching up really fast, but it's really not there now. And it's good to ask, questions like, why does AI do things or answer things the way it does? So who is it learning from? What type of data or information is it getting from? Where is it getting the data from? Is it just scouring the whole internet? I don't know. But it's really interesting to see where AI will go in the future. I think it's going to be very transformative, disruptive to the economy, and people will have to really know how to work with AI. Otherwise, you'll just be left out. So that's the video, guys. Leave a like, subscribe if you feel inclined to, and let's meet on the next video.